There are moments in history when the world does not merely change, it shatters, and is rebuilt in a completely different shape. The Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905 was one such moment. A moment when an empire that believed itself invincible collided with a rising power that the world had underestimated for far too long. A moment when Asia sent a thunderous message to Europe: the age of Western domination is not eternal. This is not just a story of war. This is a story of pride, ambition, humiliation, rebirth, and the unstoppable force of modernization. The war between Russia and Japan redrew global power lines, ignited revolutions, and changed the destiny of millions. It was a war that stunned the world, because a small nation, barely 5 decades after abandoning feudalism, stood up against the largest empire on earth and won. Tonight we journey back to the frozen seas of Port Arthur, the fog-covered waters of the Tsushima Strait, and the vast political battlegrounds of Europe and Asia. This speech reveals the hidden motives, the greed, the fear, and the unbelievable courage that shaped this conflict. The roots of the Russo-Japanese War run deeper than a dispute over land. They lie in the pride and ambitions of two empires desperate to shape the future of Asia. Manchuria and Korea were not just territories. They were symbols, doorways to influence, prestige, and strategic dominance. Japan viewed Korea as its vital security buffer. Russia saw Manchuria as essential to its dream of reaching warm water ports and expanding its empire eastward. Conflict was inevitable, long before the first shot was fired. Japan had modernized rapidly after the Meiji Restoration, but the West still saw it as inferior. Russia, on the other hand, believed itself untouchable, a giant stretching across 2 continents. Yet beneath the surface, the empire was cracking. Outdated leadership, corrupt bureaucracy, and an overconfident military. Neither nation wanted war, but both were convinced they could not afford to appear weak. Negotiations collapsed because Russia underestimated Japan, assuming diplomacy would buy enough time to strengthen its positions in Manchuria. Japan knew the truth, waiting meant death. So when diplomacy failed, Tokyo acted decisively. On a cold February night in 1904, without formal declaration, Japanese torpedo boats attacked the Russian fleet at Port Arthur. The world gasped, Russia roared with anger, and Asia awakened to a new future. The war had begun, not out of chance, but because 2 empires were trapped in a collision course fueled by pride, survival, and imperial hunger. To understand Japan's victory, we must first understand the transformation that created it. Only 50 years earlier, Japan was an isolated feudal society ruled by samurai and shoguns. But with the Meiji Restoration in 1868, Japan entered one of the fastest modernization programs in human history. Factories rose, railways spread, Western-style education transformed society, and the military reshaped itself with German discipline, British naval strategy, and Japanese spirit. Japan's leaders were not preparing for peace. They were preparing for survival. Surrounded by imperial powers carving Asia into colonies, Japan realized that modernization was not a choice. It was a necessity. Their rise was fueled by discipline, intelligence, and national unity. Every citizen understood that Japan's future required sacrifice. Soldiers were trained to fight with precision. Naval officers studied global tactics obsessively. Engineers worked day and night to build a fleet capable of challenging even Europe. By 1904, Japan did not simply have a modern army. It had a motivated, efficient, and highly coordinated war machine. Their commanders understood speed, communication, and logistics far better than Russia's generals. Their navy was smaller but technologically superior, and led by the brilliant Admiral Togo Haihachiro. When war broke out, Japan struck quickly and decisively. Their success was not luck. It was the result of decades of relentless modernization, national commitment, and an unbreakable belief that Japan must stand tall in a world dominated by empires. Russia did not lose the war simply because Japan fought better. It lost because the empire was already decaying from within. The Tsarist government was corrupt, disconnected, and shockingly unprepared for a modern conflict. Communication lines were stretched across thousands of miles. Supplies were inconsistent. Soldiers were poorly trained, and many did not even understand why they were fighting in the Far East. Russian leaders underestimated Japan at every step. They believed their empire's size alone guaranteed victory. They ignored repeated warnings from advisors, failed to modernize their navy, and treated the conflict as if it were a minor colonial dispute. Meanwhile, the Russian public was dealing with poverty, rising political unrest, and anger toward a government that cared more about imperial dreams than its own starving population. When the Baltic fleet sailed halfway around the world to reach Japan, it arrived demoralized, exhausted, and unprepared. The result was the catastrophic Battle of Tsushima, where Japan annihilated Russia's naval pride in just 2 days. The defeat shook Russia to its core and sparked the revolution of 1905. This war did not just humiliate Russia abroad. It shattered its stability at home. The world had never seen anything like it. A major European empire, a colossal force that dominated 2 continents, was defeated by a nation the West had mocked as inferior. The Russo-Japanese War changed global power dynamics forever. Japan's victory shocked Europe and electrified Asia. It was the first time in modern history that a non-Western nation had crushed a Western empire. Asia celebrated. Colonized nations saw hope. Leaders from India to the Middle East realized that resistance was possible. Japan became a symbol of strength, modernization, and national pride. Meanwhile, Western powers were forced to rewrite their assumptions. Japan was no longer a small island nation. It was a rising world power. The war also reshaped alliances. Britain allied more closely with Japan. The United States began paying serious attention to Asian geopolitics. Russia was humiliated and looked toward Europe, again setting the stage for future conflicts, including the tensions that helped ignite World War I. Most importantly, the Russo-Japanese War proved that technology, strategy, and national unity could defeat size and arrogance. It redrew borders, shifted global influence, and changed the direction of history. The world after 1905 was not the same because Japan had risen. The Russo-Japanese War was more than a clash of armies. It was a clash of worlds. It marked the end of an era in which Western empires believed they were invincible and the beginning of a century in which global power would be contested by nations once dismissed insignificant. This war shattered illusions, challenged the world order, and forced the great powers to rethink their assumptions about Asia. Japan's victory signaled the arrival of a new kind of nation, one that could absorb global knowledge, modernize rapidly, and wield it with precision. The Meiji Transformation was the engine that powered this moment. It demonstrated that discipline, education, unity, and vision could propel a nation from medieval isolation to world power in just a few decades. Japan's triumph inspired countless oppressed societies to dream of freedom and strength. On the other side, Russia's fall exposed the deep cracks hidden beneath the surface of its empire. The defeat was humiliating, but it was also revealing. It showed the world that Russia was vulnerable, confused, and struggling to adapt to the demands of a rapidly changing era. The war weakened the Tsar, strengthened revolutionary forces, and laid the foundations for the seismic upheavals that would soon follow. Globally, the war shifted political relationships. The balance of power in Asia tilted dramatically. The United States intensified its interest in the Pacific. Britain embraced stronger ties with Japan. And Europe began watching Asia not with arrogance, but with caution. Every nation realized that the future of global politics would no longer be confined to Europe. It would be shaped by rising powers beyond the West. Ultimately, the Russo-Japanese War stands as a powerful reminder that history is shaped not by size, but by will. Not by reputation, but by preparation. And not by tradition, but by transformation. It was a war that redefined strength, challenged empires, and opened the door to a new century of shifting power. Its echoes still resonate today, in politics, in strategy, and in the ongoing struggle of nations to rise, adapt, and survive. Thank you for watching this deep exploration of the Russo-Japanese War. If this journey opened your eyes to hidden truths, forgotten history, and the incredible forces that shaped our modern world, then your time here was worth it. Stay curious, stay passionate, and never stop learning. Until the next chapter of history, thank you and goodbye.